Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 35th episode of. Hold on. I'm going to run that one back.
So
Yeah, just welcome. This is the 35th? No. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 35th episode of the Without Context podcast, and I am Decavolty, joined today by Piratechnics and SharkyHat. And if that went over your head a little bit, that bit there, we have some more. We have some updated books for D&D that just came out recently, the Monsters of the Multiverse. It's been out in physical print for a while. There it is. But
it got its solo
just came out
release.
digitally, and solo.
You had to buy a box set to get it originally, which is kind
of
annoying.
Like $100. It was $120, and I was like, "That's just not happening." Yeah. So today, our topic is largely going to be about the how to get that and translate it into your game, especially if you have long-standing races such as like goblins. If you have like ogrekin or whatever you might have, if it's gotten an update, how any of us will go through and like run over those changes,
especially if it makes the race a little bit better too. I'm sure we'll get into it, but a lot of these races subtly got like buffed in certain aspects. People are like, oh, it's kind of a nerf with this ability, but no, it's not, because they've added this whole new thing of X times proficiency bonus uses. So, which is a really cool way to make proficiency bonus a little more viable in this game. It's just kind of been a number that's been attached to the character sheet. But
they've been doing that solidly since like Tasha's.
Yeah,
it's been interesting,
putting more and more emphasis on it. But as Becca mentioned, we have Piratechnics back with us today. This is the second week of guests. Haley should be back next week. She is again getting married, so congratulations to Haley, which is why she is away and the boys are here. So
yeah.
Well, I don't have any big engagement announcements to go through, but I do appreciate you having me on again. It's good to be back.
Yeah, of course.
And also, you actually do, because Piratechnics just released his dancer class last week.
Okay,
so
I guess it's a small. It's not like getting married, but yeah. It's funny you mentioned.
That kind of engagement.
Yeah. I mean, you know what?
None of us have anything going on. We're recording a podcast on Wednesday.
But anyways,
so.
It's funny you mentioned the proficiency stuff, because that actually plays quite a lot into some of the mechanics. So yeah, thank you for letting me do a shameless plug. My
go ahead.
Dancer is officially out. It's published, OGL compatible 5th edition content. It is on my Ko-fi store for $1, as well as Drive-Thru RPG. So yay!
Nice. So
I'm done with my plugs officially. D&D Beyond.
I got a free ad out of this. Sweet.
Not yet. It's not on D&D Beyond yet.
I mean, you can implement it on D&D Beyond, but you have to enable homebrew.
Yeah.
I have to. I designed the Turtle Dragonborn class on D&D Beyond, so I have to have it, and I'm terrified because people are actually apparently adding it to their own homebrew collections, and that means people like it. I wasn't prepared for that. So, but yeah, we're talking about Monsters of the Multiverse today. Some of the changes that came with certain player races, definitely some improvements in a lot of ways. And when it comes to long-running games, how these changes are going to kind of affect the gameplay itself, because now your characters are same level, yes, but more inherently stronger, which kind of might change the curve of combat in certain ways, or certain social situations, and just how you as a DM or anything can go about adjusting to this new order of things that Wizards has dropped on us in 5.5, I think, as we're going to be calling it. So
we're not there yet. I know they're doing something else that's
because
more 5.5,
like 5.3.5.
Yeah,
we're getting there.
Because
I used to work in software. There's a lot of numbers and digits.
Well, we're also getting with the Dragonland stuff that they announced, they're giving, backgrounds that now come packed with a feat included in the background too. So it's like it's a very specific one, specific to Dragonlands and those kind of, campaigns, but it's still, hey, they're starting to experiment with backgrounds. They're using proficiency bonuses more when it comes to certain abilities. All these kind of minor changes that are going to affect, characters in the long run, which I'm glad that they're experimenting. I feel like fifth edition was starting to get slightly stale to a degree. There wasn't a lot of, official races coming out that kind of shook stuff up. A lot of it had to be found in homebrew. A lot of the classes were kind of, already ranked out. Like if you want to play a fighter, you're going to play, a champion, a samurai, or a gunslinger.
Yeah.
So it's like if you want to play like the optimal classes, here's what you have. So
Me playing a gunslinger. Yeah.
But I wanted to get Luke in from the last time we had Pyrrha because I asked him, I was like, hey Luke, how are you guys going to go about using Monsters of the Multiverse? And Luke had no idea because he hadn't read the book yet. Or he hadn't like seen anything for it. And I was like, all right, well, I sent him the preview from D&D Beyond. It's like, here's what changes for kobolds. They don't have cower and grovel anymore. They now have this thing where they can, one of the options is they just get a sorcerer cantrip. So it's like, okay, cool. My kobold fighter now has green flame blade or, booming blade, whatever I want to give him. And he also has this thing where it's like a better pack tactics now. That's not exactly pack tactics. So it's like, okay, it's not a definitive change, but I am now going to, the character's now going to behave differently, maybe a little more stronger than he was because now I have, booming blade as an option as a fighter. So
It's pretty good.
that's going to be interesting.
Like pretty solid.
My trash can kobold.
I have a arcane trickster rogue elf who also has taken a few levels in fighter, and he does a lot of booming blade, green flame blade shenanigans. It's
And
like legit so much fun to like do that kind of thing, and then he just like disengages, and because he has mobile, it just runs the hell out of there, and no one can touch him.
and that's
It's
a
dumb.
good transition to like the first thing I want to like talk about is well, sort of just like here's how this ability might change to be a little stronger than it was originally. The Fey ancestry that we were talking about before we started recording. The elves originally was against being charmed, and you couldn't be put to sleep. Now I think it's just maybe against elf, it's can't be put to sleep, but goblins now have Fey ancestry, and it's saving throws to avoid being charmed and also to end it, which is a slight buff to that ability now because it's like, oh, if you do fail, you can get out of it faster too. So it's just and when we talked to our friend Mike, who's playing a goblin in one of our campaigns, Fury of the Small, he brought up it's like, oh, well, I'm doing less damage than I used to because it was originally a one-time use, equal per level. Now it's equal to number of times proficiency, the damage of the proficiency. So as you start getting higher, you're going to not have more front end, but more damage overall too. So when it comes to stuff like this, like PC races getting these kind of buffs, like as a DM, what would be something that goes through your mind when starting to assess, the situations that your characters might find themselves in? We'll start with Pyrrha. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it is really interesting. I'll preface this by saying I haven't read through the whole book, but I've seen a lot of the big major changes, and specifically for player characters. I think like using this new content is like something that in any given campaign as a DM, I would just first and foremost bring to my players, right? Especially if anything affects them. Like, obviously this doesn't affect any of the players' handbook races, although based on the discussions that have been had and the way that, this more streamlined ability score increases and different racial abilities and stuff are going, it seems like that's probably a matter of time whenever the whole 5.5 thing does drop. That's likely to be a big part of it. Uh, Whether or not this is a stopgap or it's just actually part of that. I mean, in Tasha's, we had this custom lineage option that enabled that. I didn't have any of my players take advantage of it at the time, mostly because we just didn't really talk about it. It sort of stealthed into the digital tools that I use. But for the actual book and the options there, um, it would be the same thing. I would just talk to my players and say, okay, so you're playing a goblin. Uh, in the new version of the goblin, I believe it was originally from Volo's Guide to Monsters, right? Or was
Uh,
that, or was it Mordenkainen's
I
Tome
think it
of
was
Foes? I
Volos.
can't
Uh,
remember.
Volos was the first
those
book
Okay.
Volos.
with
So
new.
if that's like the template that they're building off of, obviously, a lot of things that keep Fury the Small, stuff like that, I would just side by side the two of them. And if the player was like, "Oh, I would rather use those," and we just make the change, like kind of retcon it in a way, like narratively, it doesn't really have to make much of a change, right?
Yeah,
Whenever new content comes out, this is generally how I approach it. Sometimes it's DM specific content. Like I'm running a Ravenloft campaign, for instance. That was originally just Curse of Strahd, but in the middle of that, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft came out, and I was like, "Oh, there's a million other domains of dread, and I'm gonna play with those now."
yeah,
But I didn't have to tell my players, pardon my French, shit about it.
Yeah,
Like I
it
just
actually helps
was
that you
like,
don't.
yeah, and then I started using like the dark gifts. Like one of my players made a deal with Aslan Rex, for anyone who knows who that is, and
Oh
became a
God.
Mistwalker. Um, and that was like the impetus to let them like run off into a different domain to go basically do a fetch quest for Aslan.
Mm,
So that's what my side like that's the side quest that's going on right now. That implemented some character changes, but that was also for a character that does a lot of homebrew and is really interested in maybe not min maxing, but creating a unique narrative aspect to their character.
yeah,
They play a bard with a custom subclass that's very much like that whole Riot Games Twisted Fate thing, but it's a little different. Um, and for stuff like this, I would just go to them and say, "Okay, well, the character race you play has some new options. Would you like to use them or not?" And if they want to, just make the change. Double check that it doesn't remove anything that they want from their character. As you
yeah,
mentioned, certain things are different now. Like the kobolds don't have pack tactics per se, but they have like different options. The Fey ancestry is kind of an interesting thing to be expanded on past the elves. I know for goblins they don't have the whole can't be put to sleep aspect. It's just the charm thing,
yeah,
um, which is interesting. And I think basically my instinct is to just like ask my players what they want to do and give them options. That's what I'm always trying to do as a DM.
yeah. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it. As a DM, you're going to be having to adjust to those new things because I think like one of the minor things that also happened is like all unarmed attacks now are just like a flat D6, no matter what race it is now, which is I think a good quality of life change. And I think like Arakokras have like 30 movement speed like they would have, but now they just have an equal flying speed. Same thing with like swim speeds is equal to their normal speed. Now it's not a flat value.
Yeah,
So
that
Monk
actually
buff.
one thing I wanted to mention too is that like that whole streamlining, it seems like the intent is to push players away from quote unquote min maxing. And I know and that's obviously like a very valid way to play. I think people who want to create a optimal character who play a game that is more competitive, as long as that's something that the table and the DM and everybody around are happy and able to enable, that's fantastic. It seems that the direction that Wizards are going in is pushing more towards letting people do things interesting narratively with their characters without having to sacrifice what may be an optimal choice. For me, that's never been
true,
an issue.
yeah, a true
Yeah,
freedom of choice.
exactly. Like,
Like,
and obviously that's difficult to do because I mean, look at any video game that has multitudes of character options, and there's always going to be some sort of optimal thing that ends up getting patched. Especially in a competitive aspect. I mean, I come from League of Legends. That game gets a patch every 2 weeks for the
yeah,
past 10 years.
Destiny
Uh,
every week. Like
yeah,
Destiny gets
exactly. So
gets
that's
a
hard
change
to
every
do.
week. So
But this isn't like D&D doesn't have to be a competitive game, right? I mean, if that's how you want to play it, great. And no one's going to stop you from homebrewing up like the most busted ass shit ever if that's what everyone is down with. But I personally really like this change because I love making characters that have things that are suboptimal about them if it makes their narrative more interesting. Like uh, if I wanted to do an Aarakocra, this is like gonna get really dark for a sec. I would consider maybe making one that had his wings clipped and actually couldn't fly,
yeah,
because that would be part of like it's a bit of an edgelord backstory, but maybe he kind of like he's part of like a society that that like shuns bird people or something. I don't know. I like interesting choices like that, even at the cost of certain abilities and certain ways to do things. Also, something to aspire back to, maybe a way to like undo that. Um, it's a bit of a dark example, but like generally speaking, I just think that you shouldn't have to take a combat or ability hit in order to do something interesting narrative, and I like that Wizards is trying to enable that more.
Yeah.
For sure.
So unless Deca has anything to add.
Um, I think pretty much just asking the player how they want to go about it. I remember when I was starting I have a paid game that goes every other week on Wednesdays, and I remember shortly, just like literally just before I was going to start like session one, Fizzbands dropped, and one of the players is a Dragonborn. So I was like, hey, these are these other options I got. Do you want to take any of these? It is my belief that these are objectively better than the Dragonborn
No,
that
they
is
are.
in the PHP.
Dice wise, they
Yes.
are. So
Yes.
well, I think they had to
So
fix it because the monk had better fire breathing than the Dragonborn did.
yes,
Like,
Which
it
is
did.
just like, wait a minute, that's scope creep right there. Come on,
because I think
guys.
it
Yeah.
was like the monk was like what D8s to start, and the Dragonborn was D6s. So Fizbin came out and it's like, you know what, everybody gets a D8. So it's another
I
just
think I
quality.
think I think the monks was like 3 rolls of your monk dice, and at higher levels that is like D10s.
Monk dragon class D&D. I was on
So
the Ascendant monk, yeah,
it's the ascendant monk, yeah.
or Ascendant
I
dragon.
I think it was like several rolls of your, but like you said, like they could replace an attack with it and just keep doing it. Like, I did a flurry of blows. It's just
Yeah, when you take the attack action, you can replace one of the attacks with the dragon, an exhalation of dragon energy in a 20-foot cone or a 30-foot line that's 5 feet wide. Choose one of the types: acid, fire, cold, lightning. Each creature in the area makes a dex
Mhm.
save equal to key, and then equal to 2 rolls of your martial dice.
Holy.
yeah.
So it's just like, why is the monk getting better fire breathing than the dragonborns?
There's
I mean,
also a conversation to be had about like what bonuses you get from race versus class, right? Like, and it does
Sure.
seem like the idea that regardless of the fantasy race you pick, you still have a range of abilities. There may be some specific things that work better for you, but in terms of like your actual ability spread, that seems to be much more evened out. Whereas the class obviously is kind of your modus operandi, right? And it makes sense that
Mhm.
that's more powerful. At
yeah,
least,
and look, having it side by side here on my monitor for the legacy kobold and the new kobold. Like new kobold is like it's just a straight buff like across the board. It's
Mhm.
it's like kobold normal. You now have advantage on saving throws and to end frightened, which is completely the opposite of a kobold flavor, like you would think of, because you had grovel, cower, and beg as an ability on legacy. But now you have you can get an extra skill, choose that advantage on saving throws against being frightened, or have the cantrip from the sorcerer list. That's just
I
you
mean,
pick one of those three when you choose the kobold.
maybe when you're so used to you just frightened so frequently because life as a kobold is rough and scary and everything else is bigger than you. Maybe you're just so used to it that
Yes.
nothing scares you after a while. I always try to figure out like a mnemonic reason for why an ability
Yeah,
exists. That's kind of my game
and
design
then
instinct.
you have the pack tactics, which got removed from kobold for the draconic cry. As a bonus action, you can let out a cry at your enemies within 10 feet. Until the start of your next turn, you and allies have pack tactics, basically. So
And
you can do it equal to proficiency bonus, like not
there
just
it is
once.
again.
It's just like, okay, that's
At least
strictly
twice at like
better
level
than
1.
it's like
I
that's
really
strictly
like
better
I really
than
like that
cower and beg. Like,
tying things to proficiency is actually really cool. Like the idea that you can do things more times or they're more powerful as you get
Mhm.
stronger, because it is kind of like reflective of a level, but also specific to your class, right? Like
Mhm.
I
yeah,
it did seem like it was pretty underused for a lot of years until Tasha's.
yeah. And
I
another
I think huh?
So just another example about that, the lizard folk, their hungry jaws ability that they got, it's a bonus action. You make a special attack with bite. If it hits, it deals damage, and you gain temporary hit points equal to proficiency. So they're really giving these races like, use your proficiency bonus. Just
There's also something to be said that like there's nothing saying that you can't make like the legacy versions like a sub race.
I would say like
If it's something you want to keep in your back pocket as like an NPC that they have those abilities, or you can pull from them, if you have like a grovel, cower, and beg type of character, you could just, hey, I have this ability from Legacy, I could just toss that in there, toss it in the gumbo, as it were.
Throw in the Tower Grovel Bag as one of like the options for Draconic Heritage or something. Like one of the like just add just more stuff. But I actually wanted to chime in on what he was saying about the Arakakra and like the backstory. Back when I was destroying myself mentally and trying to put together what I called the Codex, which was all the homebrew that I've ever found in one player manual to use. I realized like Arakakra just has the one race by default, the 20 movement speed, the 50 fly, can't wear heavy armor, that kind of stuff. And I was like, we can make this better. And I slapped together the two homebrew classes based on the Thunderbirds from Native American mythology, where it's like you have one Arakakra that has like the tiefling kind of infernal legacy, where it's like you get gust and all this stuff as you level. And then this other one that gives you like lightning kind of abilities as you like level up. So it's like
you want to play that Arakakra though. That's my people.
Yeah, that'll still be available, but it's just like seeing it now where it's like, hey, we're gonna kind of streamline it a bit. It's like, cool, you can now like flavor your Arakakra a little bit more, especially now like you can customize your lineage and stuff like that. So it's like, I'm an Arakakra, I start with a feat. Like and I can start with a spell that I want that ties into like a narrative that I want to tell too. So the streamlining is really helping.
I will say there's something to be said about, if someone was, for example, attached to the name Fallen ASMR, Fallen ASMR technically doesn't exist anymore. You just pick one of the options.
At level 3, you just pick one of Phasmar options.
Yeah.
They've got rid of a lot of like the sub race ideas. They did the same thing with Deep Gnomes and Dwargar now as well. It's
I think they're kind of like their own race now too for Durgar.
Yeah.
Like they're considered like their own separate like dwarf. Like
it's just like a conceptual idea anyways, right? Like I never really made a distinction between hill and mountain dwarves personally.
Yeah. For sure. But there are people who do have that attachment. They're like, oh, they're homogenizing everything. But I am with you on that. That is just, they were just dwarf is dwarf,
And you could still get into that distinction too. Like while they are making these changes, it's a mechanical like component change, right? Like and the intent is streamline it. You can still narratively do things however you want, and as y'all mentioned, you can use the legacy content in whatever way you choose. It might be a little more work because the default is now this more streamlined approach, at least for these 30 fantastical races, I think they're referred to in Monsters of the Multiverse. But obviously Player's Handbook stuff hasn't changed. Like I always found, again, because I'm a 5th edition native anyway, so like everybody talking about all the like 3.5 stuff, I'm just like, oh cool, I was in middle school. Yeah, I just like it never really made a ton of sense from a conceptual standpoint for me. I just kind of, it was just an extra drop down in D&D Beyond or whatever tool I was using anyways. Like I think it makes a lot of sense to try and minimize the levels of depth you have to traverse to get into something. And if you want to customize, if you want to make more specifically targeted content that leans into an archetype or something like that, then there is always the homebrew, as long as you're willing to put in that work.
Definitely. And I'm still angry because they gave Stater 35 feet of movement, and it's throwing me off so much. Like
it's just the Wood Elf
things are hard when you have to do like half things and stuff like that.
Because even Harrigan's only have 30, so it's like Stater's the only one that's like one more, and it's like, why do you do this, wizards? Like, why is
Wood
this?
Elf has 35, doesn't it?
Does Wood Elf?
Wood Elf had.
Let me check.
I don't know.
They did not change. They did not change Wood Elf. So
Okay, I'm gonna look at okay, centaurs have 40. Good, because they have 4 legs. That would be dumb if they didn't
They
get
have
it.
4 legs. They should go faster. That's just
Yeah,
math.
that
You
makes
trade
perfect sense to
speed
me.
for the ability to climb ladders.
Yeah. Well, also there are certain there are
Okay, yeah.
certain
What else at
like
35?
oh no,
Yeah, yeah.
Ganassi have 35 feet too.
Oh
Really?
God.
Yeah, what? That's weird. Okay.
That's another
Damn.
thing I noticed. Air Genazis now have a built-in resistance to lightning damage, and they have
That's
the
pretty
mingle
cool.
with the wind ability, which gives them that kind of tiefling legacy, like 35-7. Here's your spells you get. Another good quality. I like you can be medium or small as like an
Yes.
option now for a lot of races.
Do
I
like
like how you
that.
can pick what your spellcasting ability is now too for those innate abilities. So it's like, hey, Air Genasi, mingle with the wind. You can use intelligence, wisdom, charisma. We're not going to have you have to pick an optimal caster class now to use this. It's like you
Ganassi
can,
used to be all Constitution, and on
yeah.
sometimes you play one, it's rough.
Yeah. It's also I think one of the reasons for like the smaller medium thing too, it really helps to try and conceptualize like a Genasi that's maybe not like half human or elven or something like that, right? Like obviously
Mm.
you can play it however much you
I can
want.
play. You can play like a dwarf Genasi
Yeah,
who's just a little
or a
smaller,
gnome or a
like
gnome Genasi or
yeah,
something
or
like that. Like
halfling.
I
Yeah,
mean, and if you wanted to, again, if you wanted to get into like, okay, well, they wouldn't really have like 35 feet of movement if they're a gnome. Well, they can, but they don't have to. You could always artificially, lower it for
Just
your
change
own
it to
purposes.
25.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you wanted to nerf yourself. Not saying you have to do that, but like I think it gets at least it gets me thinking about those types of things, and I
Mm.
wonder if that isn't the intent, even if they didn't spell it out specifically.
it's
Interesting
Because
thought
that's
experiments.
yeah,
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 it's to start having, I guess, DMs and players kind of think about things, and because this thing, all of these rules are the skeleton of the game, but they're not the meat of the game.
yeah.
As pirates, they're more of guidelines rather than rules. So
They're meant to serve the game. The game doesn't serve
it
them.
should probably be like, hey,
Yes.
look, we're kind of streamlining things. Here's our thought process behind it. Here's what a series of races look like. Here's their type, their speed, their size, abilities. Start formulating your own if you want to change up something or if you want to add your own. Like here's kind of the skeleton of how we do this now. So I
It
think
also gets rid of the bioessentialism aspect that you could argue made its
That's the
way
most
into a
important.
lot of that. Yeah, like giving people like, especially with the monsters that they showed too, like they have the alignments are typically whatever. Like
Mhm.
yeah,
that's so much better because it doesn't lock you into that like, okay, no, this is how they are. Like I remember the thing that blew my mind in one of my earliest campaigns as a DM. My party got ambushed by some goblins, and one of my players was like, "But maybe the goblins weren't evil and we killed them and now we'll never know." And my brain went, "Oh." And I realized I had been very one-dimensional with it. So ever since
Uh,
then, like I
a
love
monkey's
these
paw
things.
somewhere curls in.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
that was a like
um,
our game where I introduced Deca and the party to a Drow city, and I could tell like some people had this preconceived notion of, oh shit, a Drow, and then they were like, oh yeah, come on in, we'll help you out. So
Having
my
having
turtle hated
people
the caves.
having that like short circuit is like the best thing ever when someone has a
It
preconceived
is.
notion and you just go
I've
like
been
in a completely unexpected direction.
I appreciate this book because I've been trying personally to get better at that. I do write a lot of my stuff as kind of tropey at times, but I'm trying not to make it like a stereotype at the same time. Like I like a bunch of different cultures and a bunch of different points of history. So when our campaign was set in America, because I use a real world map with fantasy landmarks like added into it. So they were on, North America, and they met the Furborg. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to try to, make it like offensively Native American. Like, but there are people that like love nature. They live, various tribes and stuff like that, but not in a way that,
Worship the wild mother.
yeah. So not in a way that people were like, can't do that, white boy. It's like,
You gotta draw from it without appropriating it, right? Especially
yeah,
when it comes to cultures that are historically quite oppressed.
Yeah.
It's the appreciation, not the appropriation.
There you
Yeah,
go.
and the things like
Bing,
I love mythology, I love history. Like Deca, it's just the real world at its most fantastic. It's steampunk England, like I've mentioned. It's gothic horror
Cheap.
Germany. It's
You can mix and match these things too, and that's what's
yeah,
fun about it.
and it's
That's his
like
world. That's literally his world.
it's
Yeah.
conquistador Spain, like battling pirates and stuff like that. So it's
Oh
like
my goodness.
it's all these like tropey things because I love those things. I love it as like the simplest kind of fantasy I can think of. But at the same time, I don't want it to be like, oh man, that's not a good thing for you to add there. Like so it's so this kind of book where it's like, typically evil, and I can like look through the abilities and like, what it does, and it kind of be like, okay, that makes sense. But if I can read something where it's like neutral, it's like, okay, what makes this thing neutral? Like, what can I, play off of if I need to use this at a certain point as a good guy, like that kind of thing.
And the player race options too. It seemed like, I mean, part of the streamlining, there's also like a lot of like lore stuff removed, and you could kind of almost argue both ways. Like on one hand, like yeah, you're not presenting a lot of preconceived notions to players, so that they have to like tie themselves in knots to play against that. Like I know like a lot of the old like goblin stuff was very much just like, like stereotyping,
Yeah.
and to play against that type, you would have to like kind of think about it narratively, and especially as someone who cares a lot about the narrative aspect, the backstory of a character, and why. Uh i i I think like taking that away, or rather not referencing that and trying to like present as little information while still giving the important stuff is good.
Mhm.
On the other hand, it also maybe makes it hard for these choices to stand out.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely not a perfect book, but I think it does a lot to try and like limit the chances of falling into a too tropey of a trap, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, they're trying to change the chemistry of D&D to a degree. Not just like as the game,
Or
but just
encourage
as
better play
or
habits.
or encourage people to, like, hey, read it, read the lore, see how you can implement it. It's like with the drow, like I mentioned in my game, like they still have a matriarchal society, but it's definitely more respectful. It's not like, oh, I like you, you're mine, we're gonna start a family line, like that kind of thing. It's just like husband is like the guard captain. He's like, I love. It's like, this is my family. She's my wife and the house leader. It's still that matriarchal society, just not to the weird like 90s BDSM drow that it was. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's still like a
You don't
lot
have
of
to say it like that.
I'm going to say it because
Hey
they've
man, who
gotten
knows
away
what
with
who
it
knows
for
what's going on? Who knows
they've gotten
what
away
goes
with it
on
for too
underground,
long.
right?
So, but this
I
like
know what goes on underground. I was down there.
but drow society is also still, like it's very political intrigue a lot of ways. Like there is still like, power plays and stuff like that, but it's not as much as, outright murder like all drow had,
Wow.
at least in my world.
Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
and you can make it work however in your world too, right? Like tying a specific race to a specific culture and having that be unbending. Like apart from being stereotyping, it's kind of just lazy, right? Like
Yeah,
I
for
loved the
sure.
way that it was presented in the second campaign of Critical Role, right? The idea that there was this break off group of drow that got away from Lolth worship and actually were like above ground and created basically the most cosmopolitan society on that continent. Maybe a bit of spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Critical Role Campaign 2, but it's like, whatever, it's been done for a while. Uh, and it was presented in contrast to like a very authoritarian, mainly human dwarvish and halfling regime. And I thought that was a
Mhm.
really cool contrast because it kind of flipped the script a little bit. Um, and I like, obviously, like, that's just one valid interpretation of it, but I like the idea of playing off the old lore, but breaking the script in a way that is not just like saying, no, it doesn't exist. It did exist, but here's why it's different now.
Yeah.
I like making my main cities because a lot of so the players I have been like, hey, can my character be from Waterdeep New World? I'm like, yeah, I'll throw Waterdeep somewhere in my world. And then when I throw Waterdeep in my world, I make sure that it's also super cosmopolitan, much like the Jorhas in Critical Role. And I'm like, all right, well, every now and again you see like a Dragonborn, and then there's a Goblin, a Kobold, and 3 goblins in a trench coat, and there they go to the bar.
For anybody who's done Rime of the Ice Maiden, there is a stat block for 3 kobolds in an overcoat. And I'm like,
that book is like a better source book than a lot of other ones. I don't think it's the best adventure book, but man, it's got some goofy stuff in it.
I was
Yeah,
like,
it's
the
got some
Madman
funny
actually
ideas.
did it.
Yeah. The kobold vampires are also pretty funny, by the way. They are like full on nightmare fuel too.
Yeah.
I was I think that's the thing. I think like a lot of these, I wish that was something they did too. Like a lot of these stat blocks that are in the adventure books, whenever they make a book like Mordecai's Monsters of the Multiverse, I wish they'd include those into that book also, just to like continue the like monster manual rather than just have us like, this is adventure specific.
Wizards needs to make money off of all those other book sales. No, I get you. Like,
I want to see a breakdown.
Record sales for the third
I want
year
to
in
see
a row.
I want to see a breakdown of how many people are buying the core books compared to how many people are buying the adventure books.
I mean, I don't know,
It's
because
not
like
even
a lot of
close.
it's DM preference, right? Like,
Yeah.
like I mean, if you're a player, why are you buying the adventure book? Unless like you want to do both, right? I mean, like there's a lot more players than there are DMs out there. At least I would think.
Yeah, it's for sure skewed in that way. No one wants to be a DM. Everyone wants to be a player.
Well, it's just a lot more work. But you
Mhm.
also get to be God, so hey, I consider that its own reward.
That
But
is-
yeah, like I'd love to see it all combined. As it stands, though, I mean, this is the closest thing we get to like a second player's handbook and monster manual officially, right?
Yeah.
For now.
Luckily,
Because
it's not like
it's Folo's and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, and also
Yeah.
like Elemental Evil, Player's Companion. Like, there's a lot of books in this one, even if it is like
so
mostly
as a
old
player,
content.
you would need player's handbook, Tasha, Xanathar's, and this book. Basically, would be the 4 that you need to have all your player options
Plus
figured out
any
now.
like setting specific stuff, right? I mean, if you really want to do like Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide or
well, those races
or
were
something.
put into this, like, or
Were
they've
they?
been added.
Oh,
I think the Sword Coast adventure stuff was in Xanathar's when they. It was in one of the books they put in the races.
Yeah, but yeah, for like vanilla D&D, like those are the only books you need, right? Like then from there you want to maybe get into like
whatever your
specific
DM
player guides to like whatever setting you're in if it's a pre-written one.
Or if you want to play the Critical Role class, have the book, because we have a one of the Gravity Wizards in one of our campaigns now. So
love that person.
Oh yeah, those classes, the gravity and the time stuff is cool. I actually have my elf fighter rogue is an Echo Knight.
Nice.
Officially.
We have one of them in a Luke's game. It's a very cool class. But
and Bloodhunters become ubiquitous too. I mean, I feel like everybody more or less knows what that is now, even though it's not an official D&D class anymore.
It's as close to getting official as it's going to get until they add it into an official WotC book.
Yeah. I think that's another thing.
Is it in Wildmount? Because that's a crossover.
It's in Wildmount. It's not in Tal'Dorei.
Oh, okay. But only one of those is like partnership D&D, right? The other one's like
I think that's another thing. Like when it comes to content like that, where it's from this prominent creator, but it's not like an official like Wizards product. It won't be in one of Wizards books, but it's on D&D Beyond as like, this is a fighter class. Like it has always been a fighter class. Pick the gunslinger. It's like stuff like that. It's because I know there are DMs that are out there. It's like strictly whatever Wizards made. Like that's what I want to run. That's what I want you guys to run. But it's like Bloodhunter and Gunslinger feel like they're not even like Critical Role specific stuff anymore. It feels like their core D&D classes, just with their popularity now. So it's I think 5th edition really opened the floodgates for homebrew compared to previous editions. And I wanted to make a point. You brought up like, this is all you need for like handbooks now for players. Hopefully it's not like 4th edition where it's like, here's players handbooks 1, 2, and 3. And then like, here's the 6 other books of additional like classes and features. So
I
I
mean, we're kind of
actually
going that way a little bit, aren't we?
I don't know if so technically like some of the rules that are in Xanathar's and in Tasha's are technically PHP 2, PHP 3, just by way of how many player options there are versus DM options.
Yeah.
But I would argue that when the new player's handbook comes out in 2 years from now, I believe, that it'll be
The true like compilation.
yeah, it's a true compilation and not just
Like fucking
because given
player's
what they've done with
handbook, like
Monsters of the
this thick.
Multiverse,
Like,
yeah, given what they just did with Monsters of the Multiverse, I think it's going to be a compilation of the player options up to that point.
yeah.
Yeah, they'll probably strip some stuff out too for content
For
as
sure.
well, right? Or anything that becomes like legacy or deprecated.
Mhm.
And I would argue you'd probably do the same thing with the monster manual, right? Like everything that's in Monsters of the Multiverse and the monster manual, and hopefully a lot of those adventure books. It would
Uh-huh.
be great to see that compiled into the next monster manual as well. What
Yeah.
about the DMs? What about the DMs guide? Because I feel like there's a little bit that's been expanded on in Tasha's and things like that,
Yeah.
but it seems like there hasn't been nearly as much added there.
If they go with 5.5, I think we'll see a rewritten like DMG, like a compiled player's handbook, maybe with some new stuff thrown in, and the compiled like monster manual. I think if they're going to do a point, something addition, there may be, rules changes. Like they may expand upon like grapple rules. They may expand upon like the lesser defined rules in the books. I'd want to say. Maybe there'd be more spells, thrown in. It's like, hey, we created some stuff and we didn't have a place to put it, so here's some new spells. Stuff like that.
Someone at Wizards just does a massive bong rip and writes in, "Figure it out yourself, guys. The DM has the final say."
You buy
I mean,
the fucking
it's kind of
thick
reading
ass
between the lines
DMG,
there, you know?
and it's just you open the first page, do it yourself, and it's just all blank pages for you to write your own rules in.
One page of text.
I almost want them to just like do that as an April Fool's joke and like not actually sell it, but like it's advertised. It's like a PDF you can get, and it's just like a massive troll. But somebody would take it too seriously and would ruin it.
The April
This is
Fools,
internet after all.
the April Fools that same year is like, hey guys, we've gotten to the point we have like so many modifications of rules, so we're just gonna make it simpler, and it's just like we are going back to 4th edition. So it's like
That's not simpler.
New
That's
character
harder.
option, Tiamat. You play as Tiamat.
that is something I'd want to see expanded on. 4th edition had the interesting monster rule of bloodied, where it's like if it's below half his HP, it gets new abilities and stuff like that. And I think that there's a lot of design space for that too that they haven't capitalized on. I mean, even seeing these changes in the monsters, removing spell slots, changing lore, changing some other stuff about them. But I want to see like implement like just don't make them a bag of numbers. Make it actually like a dynamic kind of thing to fight. Like a bigger creature will have like a bloodied state where it gets like these things.
The lore and the mechanics definitely can tie together better, and I think that's a direction they're stepping. There are a couple of monsters, usually like epic, like boss or like god level monsters that
the
do
15
have those, like,
CR
stages.
higher kind of
I'm
things.
thinking Oriel in Rime of the Frost Maiden has like 3 forms.
Yes.
It feels very like Zelda dungeon baddie, which as a as a kid raised on the N64, like I get that. I vibe with that a lot. I definitely think, yeah, that like the idea of a bloodied mechanic, unlocking like certain different abilities, like a mythic form for high CR monsters, like that's a great idea. Or even like a certain ability that only functions under a set of hit points, right? Like imagine like a owl bear that can like berserk or something at a low enough hit points.
When it
I
hits,
think the flesh golem does that already. Actually, has this like randomly assigned attack when it's low enough. But like yeah, like a monster that like does something when it's like backed into a corner. That's kind of a cool
if it's
idea.
like if it takes more than X amount of damage, like between rounds, it gets this ability kind of thing where it's like, oh, it just got the shit beat out of it for one round. Now it's starting to, act like a wild animal around you all.
Also, like notes for how to like ideas for like what the base instinct are for or motivations are for like certain types of monsters, right? Like if they're fully humanoid, like that's obviously one complexity thing. And if you're the type of DM who likes to role play, like they have a they have speech in combat or whatever, or if it's like a beast that specifically is trying to do X as opposed to just eat. Like, I would love to see that kind of presented by creature type and maybe broken down for some of the more specific ones. I mean, yeah, it adds information, but like since alignment becomes more of a typical thing, I love the idea of like presenting that like, well, if this type of creature is evil, maybe this is how they're going to function. If they're chaotic, maybe this is how they're going to function. Maybe just like a guideline for like role playing baddies effectively. That'd probably be a
There's
DM
a
DM's guide thing.
there's in the Monsters of the Multiverse book. There's a few creatures that I've seen as I've gone through it. That I think they're mostly humanoid that have like the archer. You can roll on a table and decide what the fletching is on their arrows, for example. The Master Thief, they leave a calling card after a heist, and you can determine what that calling card is. And there are things that like spark ideas for role playing. I think it's mostly humanoid creatures, unfortunately.
I
Um,
I want them to do, because they do this in the Pathfinder Adventure Paths, when they introduce like a named character. If it's in a combat, like I think one of the adventures like starts off with you fighting like a small band of NPCs, and they have under the block it's like will fight until, like they will fight you to the death. They will fight you until X happens and then flee. Like just
Yeah.
mm,
just like notes. I mean, in adventures, it probably makes more sense to do that. I won't look at like a drow thing and just under it be like, if ally falls, this guy will run away. Like that's not scenario specific, but
It
just
does
kind
make a
of,
lot more sense in an adventure for
yeah.
like, specific characters with ideals, or if there's like a modified stat block monster, maybe like an already injured one that, it's going to have different stats and it's going to probably have a different set of concerns than your average one. I
mm.
think yeah, I think it definitely works under like specifics, and I wonder if there isn't room for it as a more general like table type of thing, or if that's just too much. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean,
Good
I guess that
question.
comes down to DM planning. It's like, hey, I'm gonna introduce this Duragard Despo, and it's
Mhm.
like, all right, situation goes south, party starts fighting him. What are the win conditions that aren't hitting 0 HP? Like what are ways that I can take, this? Like the thing as a DM, that's kind of, I think, something that we need to start thinking about more, or at least have like more guidelines for like how to formulate those kind of thoughts. Because a lot of time if people see a block of stats and they're like, let's get that HP to 0, and then they think that's it. But it's like, no, we can make this more interesting. Some DMs just need help to, I guess, start getting that, thought rolling to a degree. It's like, oh, this
I
Durgar's evil and my party's going to fight him, but what if they make a deal or something? Like,
mhm.
Depends
but
on the
you're
party too, right?
it
Like
depends on
like
the
Yeah,
party.
I
Like
think
it
I think
always
giving
depends on the
them
party.
dropping a lot of hints, like 'cause, I mean, like unless you have just a bunch of murder hobos or something, and that's also on you as a DM for selecting them. If you drop a lot of hints that like you could get out of this without fighting, players don't like to run away, right? They're almost never going to choose that unless you are very, very unsubtle about it. You are like, this is a cutscene. This is the big bad. He's going to kill you. Um, which also, is usually a bit risky. If you present a lot of like hints that this fight could end by talking or by finding a way to uh defeat without killing, X monster, I think that level of versatility is something that um Wizards is certainly trying to encourage. I mean, the entire Wild Beyond the Witchlight specifies that this is like the first
The
adventure
whole
they've published
adventure that
that you don't actually have to fight.
pacifist run.
And yet, in my actual play, my party has literally named themselves Bloodbath and Beyond. So
Oh
it's
God.
yeah, it's well, and partially that's on me because I struggle with this sometimes, giving them um non-fight options. I think sometimes people hear roll initiative and they think, all right, this is a battle to the death. And I think it's really easy to get stuck in that mindset. And it's kind of on the GM to sort of like break that mold a little bit, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about the example that I gave while you were talking, and it's like, maybe indicating it's like after a certain hit point, it's like maybe calling for all right, stop, let's discuss. Or if they hit 0, have like DM hand wave it a bit where it's like he's beaten on the ground and he starts talking to the party. Don't let him, like just straight kill him like right off the bat kind of thing. I think it comes to just having the awareness in the moment also for something like that. Whereas like you're taking track and it's like he hit 0 HP and then it's like, all right, DM mode, let's start the roleplay segment of this. Instead of just indicating, oh, he's dead. It's like, just like absentmindedly, it's like, all right, he hit 0, so my brain's turned off, this character's dead. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's a lot of DM's having really hard, I feel.
A lot of stuff
Yeah.
you have to do.
It's a lot of stuff to take into account. I had a really tense moment in a game, and my players afterwards would tell me, yeah, that was really fucking tense. Good, that's what I wanted. So they were holding one of the player character's mother's friends at knife point, and it's like, you take another step, she's going to get stabbed. And a lot of them were like, hey, I'm gonna try to sneak. I'm like, all right, roll your stealth. And they're all like, shit. We're like rolling it. And it was super intense. And it wasn't intense because of the combat, because they could just wipe the floor with the creature in reality. But it was intense because like they don't know how beaten the NPC is and how on the brink of straight dying that they were, and they were very close to death.
Yeah, it's just
and it was
so rewarding
great.
when you manage to, like, it's such an interesting balancing act, whether it's for combat or otherwise, because like realistically, it seems like you like encounters that you put your party in should still be favoring the players. At least that's always been the approach that I've taken. But there should always be a conceivable chance of TPK or things going very badly, even if it is not likely. And I think it's so rewarding when you actually find that balance. It's like trying to find the perfect temperature on the old shower head for it to not be scalding or ice water. Like anyone who's lived in an old house knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And
it's not. It wasn't even like because like I was saying, they could just murder that thing and be done with it. But like I said, I specifically said they're holding an action. What are you doing? I'm not telling them what the action is. They're holding an action.
I think with a situation like that too, like you're probably going to have these like preconceived notions of what your party's going to do. But when they change it up, it's like, you know what? I'm gonna try to sneak away and get behind them. At that point, you're like, okay, cool, they're doing something different, but you guys are still at the mercy of the dice roll. So it's like they could be like, all right, we're gonna try not to fight them, but the dice just fails, and it's just like
sometimes.
It was like the session we played last weekend, where it's like kind of the preview for the session that begins 3 years from now in my little calendar of campaigns that I have in mind. And it's just like Kevin's rolls were just bad all night, and I could tell like by the end, like he was just he had fun, but he was kind of frustrated that he couldn't like do more in the session. So it's just like
my monk started by jump kicking off a roof.
It's just that like if your party does try to do something different, like as a DM, like they're still kind of at the mercy of the dice sometimes. And
I think that's true, but there are also ways you can reward them for the creativity and not put it behind a dice roll chance, right? Like I ran into the same issue in one of my other sessions where I had a player tell me that they were very frustrated afterwards because a lot of what they tried to do failed because of the dice, and some things didn't have to be behind a dice roll, just like minor things that they could have done. And I had noticed that they had such poor luck because it was a very chaotic session. There were things that I could have given them to do that were just not at all like needing a role.
I need to get better at that too. Like
it's a learning process. It's very hard.
Somebody's like, can I do something? And it's just like, yeah, give me a role. I need to start like stopping to be like, all right, their character, their backstory is like, he would know that. So you give him like a flat value or something to kind of go with. So
or even just also like fully abstracted out of that. Just be like, well, they can do that. It's so reliant. Like they should be able to do that 9 times out of 10 anyways.
There's also something
Yeah.
to be said about like at least in a game like Sharky's, where like we have the roleplay channels that can contribute to the main session when we get to it. There's like my character in that game. I told the party, I told Sharky, hey, there's all this silver in here. Can I just make ammo out of it? Because we're, in the duchy or next to the duchy or near, monsters that conceivably could be weak against silver, which my character would know because he's a 567-year-old elf.
I had to do math. I had to get the weight of a silver coin, compare it to the weight of a lever action rifle bullet from like the Civil War era, and then do math to see how many bullets he could conceivably make from that.
Here's the difference. Here's the difference between you and me, Sharky. You did that. I would be like, cool, how many coins is it? You can make that many bullets.
No, I had to ask.
There's like 11,000.
There was 5 digits of
there.
silver, so it's like 5 digits of silver.
I mean, I would have just been like, you can do it, but it takes X amount of time based on what you have access to.
Yeah. At the time, we had access to like a decent like guild hall. So I was like, hey, look, I'll make the math easy for you. We'll just say I have silver bullets for the rest of the campaign.
I get really lazy about that stuff. I don't even usually do ammunition unless it's like magical or something.
See, there are times where I will just like do something that's like, what can I do from this? And I'm just like, yeah, that's fine. And then there are times where it's like, I need to do the math real quick. So
one moment.
Yeah. That is also a balance to strike, and you start to Google very specific things like
you get on a watch list from your Google.
History. my Google search
100%.
history has some weird stuff.
Dude, I write fiction, so like between that and D&D, I gotta be on like at least half a dozen.
But
yeah,
I've been telling them too as like disclaimer. I'm like, this like campaign that we're currently on, like this epic level campaign with like this long running story and like world threat and the accumulation of a bunch of campaigns that I wasn't able to finish in the past, like being all linked into this. This is my figure it out campaign. Everything else after here will be a little more streamlined. So,
but hey, when you figure it out, you got it for next time.
Yeah,
there you go.
So it's a.
I ran a module as my first campaign, like front to back, but I put it in my world, so I kind of figured it out as I went along with the module. Because I had to like look ahead in the module and like slap it into my world somehow.
Yeah, I did that with my Curse of Strahd thing for so long because I started homebrew and then I realized this is a lot. This is really hard. So I swerved everybody and I just dropped Barovia into my world. And
here's what you do.
There's so much more.
You swerve them again, and you use the book that I found on DM's Guild. That's Curse of Strahd, but everybody's gender bent.
Oh, is that She is the Ancient? I have seen so many good reviews of that. I love that so much.
And I was just like, it's Strahd. Another swerve. I mean, yes, but also no. So
yes,
well,
but also
I'm living out all of that by adding in as much homebrew and cross Ravenloft stuff. Like that's the fun thing is like it goes from like Dracula. And when you start swerving into like other domains of dread and having people interact with each other and there being like lots of Mistwalkers, like all of the characters in Van Richten's, which is probably the most read book I have right now. It goes from like full on like actual Dracula gothic horror into like Van Helsing League of Extraordinary Gentlemen bullshit. And I'm like,
you're on a ghost train.
I love those films. I know they're bad, but I love them. And like that's
wrong with loving bad films.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, and the funny thing is, one of my characters is basically like Hugh Jackman Van Helsing, and I'm like, yeah, we're just gonna go with this.
Or you can do what we did, where our group has such a mutual love for the Mummy that campaign 3 is a like desert, like points of light, like tomb treasure hunting campaign.
Can I drop another shameless plug?
Sure.
Yes.
My
Night of Lycaeum or something.
Yeah, Night of Lucarian is my best-selling DM's Guild, and it's the Mummy meets Night of the Museum.
Oh yeah.
So if you like that kind of shit, you should check out dmsguild.com and search for that.
I did last.
You guys a link or something at the end.
No, like I did last time. Like all the stuff will be in the description.
Yeah, I got 2 ads. Let's go.
Woo!
Yeah, thank you by the way.
I do like I like that party makeup because it I like it because it wasn't 2 parties that got smushed together and they were like, all right, deal.
Yeah,
this is a party that we all chose.
Yeah, because the campaign I was running 2 separate campaigns, and like I was saying in the previous time you were here, I kind of just slammed them together because certain characters had plot elements that made the other party's story work better.
Oh, I remember now. Yeah.
So
My
I
player
took
character should have been in the other
two
campaigns.
two very different parties and just smushed them together. So there's like a bunch of just different backstories and different characters. But now what the third campaign is going to be is like you all are hired by a parrot Aarakocra who's in debt and he needs to find some treasure, and you guys are a crew on a sandboat. So
So you started on hard mode, like you
I did. I absolutely shot myself in the foot.
You started with the Avengers, but you didn't watch any of the other films ahead of time. Yeah, that's difficult. That's hard,
I started with Endgame.
Oh.
And now we're going back to like Avengers 1.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah, that's oof.
So, but
I
world and the
like
story,
that group's makeup too.
Yeah, it's a very interesting part because there's a lot of homebrew involved in it also. So we have a from Sterling Vermin. I don't know if you ever heard of that group that makes D&D content. They have a pugilist class, which is just a like boxer.
Is that the best known pugilist? Because I have heard of it.
Yes.
I just know that it's okay. So
he's using the subclass that's just like the back alley like fist fight kind of guy, and it's a punchy monk. Like it's a very just like I'm gonna knock you out kind of monk style class.
Strength-based monk.
Yeah, I've actually seen fighter martial archetypes that do similar stuff. I mean, I'm in a lot of discords where people
so he's that, and he's a bear shifter. So you just have this guy just going around and then just like bear form punches you in the face. Compared to like we have
this is some like Darksiders like
it's
Tekken
really cool.
kind of shit. I'm here for.
We got an elf from my version of Atlantis that's a gunslinger. We got a cleric who's having a very hard time because she was literally just in school when all this happened. So
she was doing her like her what was it called, the
she was doing her like internship at like a church that she met the party at.
Cleric is baby and is just like thrown off the deep end. Okay.
Yes.
Is this streamed? Is this an actual play?
No, mostly because I'm on Wi-Fi for everything right now. So this weekend though. This weekend though, I'm gonna plug myself a bit. I'm gonna have the house to myself finally, so I can run the cord through like the living room to my computer. So I'm gonna see if I can stream this weekend, and if I can, I'm actually gonna do some campaign like prep for stuff. So
I can't look at your stream then.
Not for campaign 1.
I can.
Okay.
I'm actually
your campaign 1 stuff should be.
My campaign 1 stuff is in the Aether, and when I need it, I pull it out. Like I have so many notes in notebooks and like various folders on my computer. I'm like, oh yeah, I did make a note for this. Where did I put it? Like it's at that point now. I'm gonna try to
get like a world anvil or something. It's so intimidating, but I'm tempted to do it for my own homebrew.
But hopefully starting next hopefully I can figure out something with like my living condition by the time the next campaign starts that I can actually start getting it into a recorded
you could always do it as an audio only. I mean, that usually doesn't require as much on the video side of things.
We just need to be able to keep track for me to record it on audio.
Yeah,
there'll be a lot.
That's the challenge.
So I used to actually record the sessions, and then the laptop that had the recordings on blew up. So it's like, oh, well, I guess I can't do that anymore.
That's one way to take notes, though. To be honest, like if you're like really
dedicated. It's what I do with my paid game, so I can be like, "What did you guys do last session?"
Oh God, I have to try to do shorthand when my players are doing stuff. Like, and sometimes they write things down that I look after. I'm like, what did I mean by this player reverse Shawshank salmon? And it was because my druid swam up a sewer pipe as a salmon to break into a place. I can't decipher my own notes sometimes.
I used to keep like little summaries of what happened in the previous session, and I just stopped doing it because at this point in the campaign now, we're getting so close to what the end is. I'm like, here's a session. We'll kind of role play leading up to it between each session. So there's not a lot of sessions that are going from point to point. It's like there's enough RP, and then the session starts, and it's like, here's a story moment that I want to get to. The text roleplay will continue. Here's the next story moment I want to get to, just to wrap it up because it needs to just be wrapped up. This has plagued me for 7 years. So This is a campaign
He's
we've been
getting
running
nervous
for.
about it again.
This is a campaign we've been running for like 2.5, almost 3 years now, and the
Oh.
total overarching story of this world that I've wanted to do with this character, like as a boss, is something I started in a campaign 7 years ago. So I'm like, just end it. Let me move on. Let me move on
Let
to
me get
phase
this
4.
monkey off my back.
It's like, let me move on to phase 4
Well,
of this
You
D&D
have
setting.
you have more patience than the Game of Thrones writers. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I mean, all 3 of those previous
Ooh.
sessions, they didn't finish, so that's why I'm trying to finish this one. So
Oh, dude, I know how you feel. Like sometimes you really have something lined up, whether it's a session or a campaign, and you never get the payoff. My home session last week, is a big like Grand Masquerade ball, and one of the players literally had to leave as they were arriving. So I'm like, cool, cliffhanger. See you next time.
yeah,
But
I want
sometimes scheduling issues and things like that.
I want DMs listening to this episode. It's not as scary as we're making it sound. You just gotta be ready
Scarier.
for it, because
You have to do so many more
anything,
things, but it's so much more rewarding.
and the thing is, everything you plan and prepare for and have notes for, your plan won't survive first encounter with the party. So
Nope.
be ready to not use any of it.
And I've been trying not to have like a plan. I've been trying to just throw out like, here are some characters that have their interests and motivations, and just see who gets interacted with and chase that up. And I'm hoping that works out.
Yeah.
Because yeah, plans, you can have a vague idea of where things are going, but actually trying to plan something is a fool's errand.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. But
I
yeah.
I do like that.
Anybody have anything else to add? I think it's about that time. So
So when we were talking about like getting all of the stuff and putting it in one source, like the Monsters of the Multiverse did earlier, I'm actually reminded that Vampire the Masquerade is also doing something similar to that, and they are eventually going to put all of their stuff in one section with all of the errata that they've done. Because oh boy, let me tell you, for those of you who are like who've only played Fifth Edition, nothing wrong with that, by the way. I'm not judging you. Trying to go directly from a 5th edition game to Vampire the Masquerade is very difficult. There are
yeah,
so many things that you have to keep track of as a player. So many things you have to keep track of. You have boons, you have banes, you have compulsions, you have all these things that uh, in other games it would be narrative and you could just like hand wave it. But these are things that actually matter in the game because it determines if you are if you strike closer to being just the beast or not. Um, and I and in that game, we ran when we ran into errata. Like we would bring it up to the storyteller. The storyteller's like, "Yeah, it's fine," and just go
yeah.
with it.
I've been meaning to
Um,
pick up newer printings of the 3 core books because I know they have the errata like
They're
already
already
changed up in and out.
super thick boys too. I just have the players,
yeah,
or just
Yeah,
the main like book, and it's like one of the thickest like RPG books I bought. So there's a lot,
it's
and I
it's
really
big
want
and
to play Vampire the Masquerade at some point.
yeah. It's a fun system. That could be its whole other episode. So,
it's
but
a whole other vampire episode. Yeah,
yeah, it's kind of, we started with the how do you handle the new rules or like changes in a current edition to newer aspects of it, kind of a soft 5.5 for player races.
a soft reset.
And
Yeah,
most of the time it's going to reward the player. It's hey, your character can now do more. I'm not going to stop you from doing that, especially like I'm playing as a kobold in a game right now, just having pack tactics and grovel. I don't really have a lot to do, especially as a fighter, like a pre-level 5 fighter. But now having a bonus action where I can give everybody within 10 feet of me advantage gives me a lot more stuff I can do on my turns now. Especially it's like, hey, I'm gonna give myself advantage on this attack. So it's definitely something that's like, don't punish your players for changes, I would say, is kind of the rule. Like, ensure that your players have fun. Just
especially if it's not their fault.
Yeah,
a lot of time
it's
it's going to be the DM that has to deal with the new challenges coming towards them.
Mhm.
Because
it really follows from the ethos that I think Tosh has started to establish, right? The idea that like you can add new stuff in and let people change their like subclass. I mean, I've done this in my campaigns where one of my players wanted to switch his blood hunter subclass from being like more of an alchemist to being more like a kind of a mini warlock. It's these two different things, and we
Mhm.
we handled it narratively because it was like a god that he was working with, that like that he had like gained a better relationship with. Whether or not you choose to do a narrative tie into it or require them to go through some sort of ritual or something to make that happen, it is about rewarding the players, right? New spells, new feats, and things like that. I mean, new official content and third party content is getting added all the time. And I've had players come up to me so many times, and I've been as a player who sees something new and is like, "Ooh, I want that." And I think like it's definitely always going to be up to the DM, but like they should, in my opinion, default to like yes and right. Like if they can, if new options are available that weren't available when somebody chose and set the character up, they should get the opportunity to do it. Unless you have a very specific reason for not allowing it that has been agreed to and bought in by all the players.
Yeah. Or if it makes sense, like let's say a race is introduced in a new book that wasn't previously available, and a party member was like, "I want to play that race. I don't want to play, a halfling or a dwarf anymore. I want to switch over to that one."
Mhm.
If it's in a point where it's like they're in a city, just be like, "Oh, look, new party member comes in, other guy like leaves." And you can just kind of hand wave like what that character knows. Like we'll say, "Oh, the first time we leave the city, we'll drop all the information onto them."
Yeah. And the
Mhm.
communication with the party to enable that is what's important, right? Like
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest pitfall, as a DM, is not like setting up, at least for me, it's been not setting up players to like share information and help them to like get more cohesive and develop as characters, right? And like you have to
yeah.
talk to your players to figure out what it is they want to do and present opportunities for them to do it.
I think the big thing is just at the end of the session, did your players have fun?
Oh,
And
for sure.
it's just the
I
more that
always
you,
ask
you
my
take,
players.
the more you take the proverbial bat to the kneecaps, they're not going to have fun playing
Yeah,
D&D with you. So,
it's true.
and
Let them
because I
be
Oh,
mean,
I thought
heroes.
of I thought of
Oh, go ahead.
another example. Yeah, when when Van Richtens came out and the Reborn was a sub race in there, or a an
an aspect.
ancestry or whatever
Yeah,
they're
it's not
calling
even
it.
it's not even like a sub race. It's kind of just like a thing now that's like thrown in.
Yeah. My character at the time was playing. I was playing this halfling. My roguelock, probably my favorite PC that I have, because he's very much the touch everything type of character. I love playing him. It's great. But when the Reborn came out, I immediately showed it to my DM, like, hey, I think because of I'm Undying Warlock, I'm Phantom Rogue. I think this is the play here. And she was like, yeah. And then we like negotiated over which traits I keep and which traits I get replaced with. And it's a reborn halfling, so it's like the I get an extra 5 feet of movement because I'm reborn now.
Yeah,
But
just
it
the
was it was super cool.
You don't have to worry about pulling a hamstring when you're dead.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think like we ended last time with you, Paris, the let all your rolls be crits. I think this episode can kind of sum up. You don't have to be a great DM. You just have to be the right DM for your players. It's like as long as everybody's having fun, it's like I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, I won't be as good as the people that I watch. If you sit down and do it, and your players come back for session 2, you're doing something right. So it's
Watched
definitely
if
a
you watched all of if you watched all of any campaign of Critical Role, you can DM.
yeah,
Straight up. If you watched all of any one campaign of Critical Role, you are already ready to DM. You don't need
Go past
buy
it.
a
There's
DM's
tons of
guide,
actual
buy
plays.
the starter set. You're good to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, well, and like yes to both these things, right? If you are somebody that's primary goal is for your players to have fun, and you talk to them and listen to them and make sure everybody's got buy-in with what you want to do and what the players want to do, and yeah, it is about that negotiation. It's about putting in that work, but once you do, there's that level of trust that you're going to give them opportunities to have fun.
Mhm.
um that is the most important thing. And there are a million ways to play and a million ways to DM, and none of them are any less valid as long as everyone's enjoying it.
Yeah.
For
Just
sure.
you got to be the right DM for your players. So your players have to be right for you too. Don't let people at your
That's
table
true.
who are assholes.
It's
So,
a two-way street.
Yeah.
as Matt Coville
Yeah.
says, don't be a wang rod. So, but yeah, I guess that will be today's episode. Had another good
Woo.
discussion. Always enjoy the company
Always
of
fun to have.
Pyrotechnics.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And as always, his links and everything will be in the description. Check out his dancer class. Check out his, DM's Guild page. Great adventures. You had the cryptid compendium. Is that you also? So if you want to have your party fight Mothman, so
Yep.
you can do that in D&D, which is fantastic.
Thank you so much for the shout out.
Yeah, but it was great having you back, Piro. We definitely appreciate it, especially on such a short notice. I know you're probably a busy man with the Castles and Casters channel and other responsibilities.
There's a lot going on, but I've always got D&D in my brain, so happy to contribute and ramble. Thank you for giving me a platform to just word vomit for an hour or so.
D&D brain
definitely.
rot.
Yeah,
I love
pretty
talking
much.
to other DMs and all that. So
I always learn something. So yeah, thanks for having me back.
definitely. All right. Well, if you all enjoyed this episode, usual stuff, like, comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Again, if you're just watching us and not subscribed, that's kind of weird. Just not getting the updates, but always checking the channel. Pira's information will be in the description. Follow him on Twitter. Check out Casters and Castles. The Twitch channel that he DMs for, as well as I believe plays in. Do you play in another game?
A couple of one shots and things like that. Small series.
You mostly do the DMing on the Feywild campaign. Forget the title of it.
Covens and Cauldrons.
Covens and Cauldrons.
It is on Mondays at wow, my brain's going all over. 6 p.m. Pacific time. Currently on hiatus until the start of June. But yeah, we are running through Wild Beyond the Witchlight.
Yep.
Oh, I love that campaign. Just reading through it, like you can go through that campaign and not have a single combat, but you also are able to TPK your party like that if they move wrong.
An interesting experience with
pacifist run. Let's go.
Yeah, we're doing a genocide run so far.
Oh no!
I think that may change because, as I mentioned, I trying to get better at getting making my players aware of the fact that just because initiative happens doesn't mean it has to be a fight to the death. And that is something that we live and learn. Adding on to the DM thing, just because you did something as a DM that wasn't maybe optimal in retrospect doesn't mean you can't make it better next time.
Definitely. It's always a learning experience. Every session's something that you can look back on and see what you did right and what you could have done differently and improved upon for the next campaign.
Everybody makes mistakes too. And that's the thing. Even your favorite, DM actual play person.
There have been many times DMs in games have been like, actually I forgot this. So and they find it and correct themselves. And that's really all you can do. Just correct yourself and move on. Or if it's something that would change a lot of stuff, just they don't know you made a mistake if you don't mention it. So
you obsessively mention it, Sharky.
I do obsessively mention it because I'm stressed out all the time.
You got to just hit the roll and keep going. Yeah, that's the entertainer instinct that you have to develop. You just if it's a minor mistake, don't even mention it. 99% of the time, no one will notice.
No, most of the time my stress is like, so what's this character's name? Shit. It's like I didn't grab it.
My name is NPC.
No, I tell him, I was like, I make this character, I make what he has on him, I make what he does, and I always forget the name. So when I look at the sheet, it's like, God damn it, Google the name real quick. So
FantasyNameGenerator.com real quick.
Yeah. But we're definitely over time now, so let's wrap this up. So Pira, thank you for being here. Thank you all for watching. Shout out the channel, share it, and leave a comment. If there's any questions for any of us, especially Pira, leave them in the comments. We'll see, and maybe next time we have Pira on, we'll ask him some of your questions.
There's a solid 25 years of DMing in between the three of us.
Definitely. I've been playing since 3.5 in high school, so
yeah, so that's
you guys
easily 25 years.
I got 3 or 4 maybe.
I skipped fourth, but I still pick up a bunch of the books to look at stuff with creatures, that bloodied mechanic. I look up oh, lizard folk, let's see what they have, and I'll look through and maybe get ideas and stuff like that. So older editions are great to reference, especially when it comes to certain things. So definitely like expand your edition knowledge too. Like pick up older books, see, there might be something that sticks out. It's like, oh, this isn't in here. I would like to use this. DMing is about great DMs. Was it great DMs? Good DMs create great DM steal. So
Fantastic DMs do it to such an extent that you can't tell which is which.
It's just the Gravity Falls, the 3 books. Plagiarize every work of fiction I've ever read, make one player cry, kill a PC. I've done it. I'm a DM.
What's that like Thor Ragnarok thing where it's like, behold my stuff, and it's like homebrew, every like little tropey thing from all the things that you like, every bit of like fantasy fiction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to create a incredibly detailed world. Just use stuff that you know and like. And I'm pretty sure if you do it with enough love, your players will like it too. So, but
that's a good thing to end on.
Yeah. So we will see you all next week. Haley should be back again. Leave comments congratulating her on her wedding, unless things go bad after this video, in which case forget I said that. But I'm gonna knock on wood for that one. So that I'm gonna just end it on. I'm gonna say one more thing before I leave. That happened at work. Somebody at work was like, "Hey man, how's your wife?" Not knowing that the guy's wife died like a month ago because he hasn't been to work. So it was one of those things. I was there. I heard it. I got the like nervous sweats, and I had to get up and leave. So I was like, "Oh, this is that awkward moment where I don't want to be here anymore." So
my social anxiety is going, and I'm not even part of this.
Yeah, if I just seen that on like a streaming show, I would have like instantly quit.
Oh yeah,
that's brutal.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where I'm just like,
man,
like I was gone. But hopefully Haley has a lovely wedding. I hope we get to see pictures of it. I know her private life outside of us is a little more private, so hopefully we can see some fun images, and hopefully she'll let us share it on our Instagram that we don't use. So, but leave congrats for her, and she should be back next week. So we'll be back to the usual crew and probably give her the episode. But Pira, hopefully we can get you down the line again, maybe with a new release where they changed up some stuff. Maybe they drop some new like rule set, maybe another player's hand guide out of nowhere, just slapping us in the face with more stuff to buy. So
Spelljammer.
To be on.
Yeah. But thank you all for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye.